Today on Government Matters, we kick off Women's History Month with Where the Rubber Meets the Road on government infrastructure projects. I speak with the head of the Federal Permitting Council on how she works across agencies, state governments, and communities to get those projects done. And the second female Secretary of the Air Force on improving aircraft readiness. Government Matters starts right now.
From Washington, D.C. and around the world, this is Government Matters with Mimi Gerges.
This is Government Matters, the only show covering the latest news, trends, and topics that matter to the business of government. I'm Mimi Gerges. Large federal infrastructure projects require coordination across agencies, state governments, and communities. The Permitting Council was established in 2015 to make the permit process seamless, transparent, and efficient to get those critical federal projects done. Christine Harada is the Executive Director of the Permitting Council. Christine, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so what is the Permitting Council and why was it established?
So fundamentally, we serve as a central coordinating body for federal infrastructure permitting and requiring typically coordination between a number of different agencies. We were first stood up in late December 2015, largely for the purpose of ensuring that that process is carried out as efficiently, smoothly, and transparently as possible.
So tell me about how the council is set up. You're the executive director, then what?
Correct. So we are set up as with the governing body of 13 member agencies, typically the deputy secretaries at those agencies such as the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Interior, Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, all the agencies that are involved in the permitting and environmental review and authorizations process. The statute set up a set of governance rules as well as processes that are required of federal agencies to meet with respect to transparency and accountability.
So it's essentially any agency that might have anything to do with an infrastructure project.
That is correct.
So before there was a permitting council, how was this handled?
So there was a lead up of about 12 years worth of executive actions. We were first stood up as a presidential memorandum. Certainly during the Obama administration, there was a lot of concerted effort, you may recall, with the ARA funds. And we are officially codified into law, thankfully, because Congress saw the value add of having such an entity. And that was, of course, happening in late 2015. So before that, it was really just interagency collaboration on a one-off basis.
But how would you have gotten a permit, say, to build a very large federal infrastructure project?
Yes. So if you're a project developer, typically it's the project developer that is working with a lead agency, but it is incumbent upon the project developer to coordinate themselves amongst the other cooperating or participating federal agencies. And so in this regard, we provide hopefully what the project developers would consider to be a value-added service with respect to helping guide them. What are the permits that you need? What's the sequencing? What agencies need to be involved and by when? Okay,
so give us an example. Start with a sample project, and how does it flow through that process?
Yes, so once a project developer submits an application with us and we deem it to be an appropriate infrastructure project, and there's certain criteria that are articulated in the statute, the agency has 14 days to make that determination.
And this would be, say, a new road, a new highway, a new bridge,
yes,
something like that?
Correct. In our case, there are 12 specific sectors that are articulated in our authorities to include things like renewable energy production, conventional energy, broadband, water infrastructure. So there's quite the gamut of projects that are available. And so once a project developer, say, submits an application, the agencies now then have 60 days by which we need to develop a comprehensive project plan, identifying what are all the permits that are needed, by what agencies, how do we sequence those events to the greatest extent that we're able to estimate at this time.
What's the total timeline from when the developer comes to you initially to when they're breaking ground?
So that will depend on the type of project itself. On average, we find that our projects take about 3.5 years to permit, and typically our projects are very large. They're well over $200 million. A lot of our projects right now are in the billions of dollars, and in fact, our overall portfolio is about $98 billion worth of projects scattered throughout the United States.
So tell me about the 13 members on the council and how you work with them.
So we're fortunate to have a very fantastic, talented group of leaders at these agencies. The Permitting Council meets on a quarterly basis to discuss things like what are the issue resolution or resolving issues about various policy differences that might be coming up, working through project sticking points or other scheduling type of issues, and overall ensuring that there's proper oversight and coordination across the various agencies.
So tell us how you're coordinating with the state governments, with local communities, because a lot of people are going to be impacted by these large projects.
Absolutely. One of the great things about our statute is that state governments can also opt in to the process itself, and so therefore if they would like to participate, their environmental reviews and authorizations can also be incorporated as part of the overall Gantt chart. We are working super closely with many state and local governments, particularly through organizations like the National Governance Association, to ensure that they are ready and able to work collaboratively with us and as smoothly as possible on the permitting front. There's certainly a lot of effort right now with the Infrastructure Implementation Task Force on ensuring that the funding is being distributed and that states are able to understand or know how to apply for the grant funding, et cetera. Soon thereafter, we'll be following on with the permitting section.
All right, so what if a local community comes together and says, you know what, we don't want this huge project going on in our neighborhood?
Certainly. So that is something that is usually involved with the stakeholder engagement process. It's articulated in NEPA, or the National Environmental Policy Act. That is a requirement certainly in statute itself. One can argue that some projects do it better than others with respect to the degree to which the local community or the effective communities writ large are actually engaged. There certainly is an official process that communities can and do go through in order to be able to make sure that their comments are being incorporated into the overall design.
Okay, Christine, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back. Coming next, we continue speaking with Christine Harada on permitting for large government infrastructure projects. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm here with Christine Harada. She's the Executive Director of the Permitting Council. Christine, tell us about how you assess the environmental impact on communities, especially low-income communities.
Yes, so there's a number of environmental reviews and authorizations that any large project must go through. The seminal law, of course, is NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, that articulates a very clear process by which communities are supposed to be able to participate in that process. With a lot of the efforts in the administration underway with Justice 40 and whatnot, we are working further to bolster that engagement that historically perhaps may not have been done as well.
And how long does that environmental review take?
So that can certainly vary depending on the project itself. Again, anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 years, depending on the type of project that it is.
See, that's a lot of time.
It is certainly,
and we need this infrastructure to get put up. I mean,
absolutely.
Isn't there something you can do to shrink that down?
So we want to make sure that we are appropriately streamlining the process and making it as efficient as possible. I also am very committed to ensuring that we're not shortcutting the process itself. Some project developers may believe that just by working with us that it's an automatic yes, or that we're accelerating your project, and that's certainly not the case. Our job is to make sure that everybody knows who's on first, what's on second, which authorization is up and when, so that communities know when to engage, so that local communities also know when potential projects might be coming down the pike. From a workforce development, economic and local community development kind of perspective, so now they can predict, now's the time we should be training up our folks to be able to go work on that particular construction site.
You mentioned Justice 40. What is that?
Justice 40 is an initiative and effort within the Biden administration to ensure that 40% of available funding is allocated towards traditionally disadvantaged communities. And it is a big commitment of this administration and a priority for us to ensure that we are doing right by a lot of the environmental injustices that have been experienced in the past.
So how do you do that, though? How do you direct those projects towards those particular communities? So
typically the funding agency, those agencies that grant those types of funds, for example, the Department of Housing and Urban Development or Transportation, in their grant-making programs have been rethinking through how to best make sure that they are actually meeting the President's goals.
So what is the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool?
So the Council of Environmental Quality just recently released the tool. I'm quite a bit of a data nerd, and so it's a lot of fun to play with. I highly encourage you to play around, if you will, but it's a tool that enables the government to be able to visualize, leveraging a lot of GIS technologies, what are the traditionally disaffected communities especially from an environmental justice type of perspective. It's in a beta format at the moment, and so we highly encourage folks to play around with it, send us feedback about how they would want to use it, how might local communities want to use that data on a very, very granular basis.
And when you say environmental justice, give us an idea of what you mean.
Sure, absolutely. So I am originally from the Los Angeles area, and many of the communities that are around the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are heavily affected by a lot of air pollution, whether that be from the ships that are coming in to our ports. We are the largest port, I believe, in the United States. 40% of all goods from China come through the ports of LA and Long Beach, and all of that is shipped by truck. So that means large diesel trucks are running through a lot of these older, again, historically disadvantaged communities, resulting obviously in air pollution, significant traffic congestion issues, which lead to a lot of health issues.
I want to ask you now about wind energy, because the Biden administration has set a goal of 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. A lot has to happen to reach that goal. How are you involved in that?
Yes, so we are working very closely with most, if not almost all, of the offshore wind developers that have projects in process underway, largely by, again, coordinating what their overall project plan will look like, what agencies need to be involved, when those permits need to be administered. And this is a new and burgeoning field for us as a nation. Period. We are starting from scratch, and it's just super exciting to me to be here at the start of it. That also means that we're doing a lot of learning. And so learning from a technical front, what kinds of environmental analyses do we need to conduct? Because these are problems that we've never had to think about before. How do we ensure that the different agencies are cooperating together and sequencing things potentially a little bit differently than perhaps might have been in the past?
Where are we right now on offshore wind? I mean, have projects gone up? Are we actually getting energy out of them?
So we have just finished permitting 2 of the projects within the Biden administration. The first one was off the coast of Massachusetts, and of course we just finished all the environmental reviews and authorizations for the South Fork wind farm in the New York Bight. So they broke ground a couple of weeks ago.
Where are we on replacing lead pipes for water? Because that's also a Biden administration priority.
Absolutely, and it's a super important one. The Environmental Protection Agency has announced the granting mechanism by which that can be allocated by states, and so there's a big push out for that particular work.
It's Women's History Month, Christine, and I wanted to ask you about your leadership and what advice you would give to women who want to become leaders in the federal government.
Firstly, it's just a tremendous privilege and honor to serve in the government, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity, as well as for all the other women leaders who are serving in government. I think it's an incredibly important mission. For women in government that are aspiring for leadership type positions, I encourage folks to really broaden their skill sets, follow the passion, whatever work is really interesting for you, go out and do it well, do it to the best of your abilities and do it well. Last but not least, find mentors and sponsors who are willing to stick their necks out for you, give you the opportunities that you might not otherwise have had.
Do you find any particular challenges of being a woman in the federal government in a leadership position?
No, actually, so having spent time in both public and private sectors, it's been my experience that certainly in the public sector, a lot more opportunities are afforded to women and to people of color. I started my career as an aerospace engineer, clearly a very male-dominated environment, and have experienced that for over 20 years. And I'm so pleased right now to be working with so many women. It is absolutely amazing to see that the room is majority women these days.
All right, Christine, thank you so much for being on the program, and we'll want to follow up with you and see what happens with these infrastructure projects.
Absolutely.
Coming next, the Air Force's mission capability rates of some aircraft is in the low 70% range. Straight ahead on Government Matters, how the Air Force can meet 100% mission capability readiness for all its aircrafts. We'll be right back. The Air Force's mission capability rates of some aircraft have remained in the low 70% range over the last few years. The Air Force needs to have a 100% mission capability rate when considering countering Russia or China. Deborah Lee James is the former Secretary of the Air Force. She's also author of the book Aim High. Secretary James, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Great to be back, Mimi.
So you said this in 2015, quote, "More than half of our combat air force is not sufficiently ready for a high-end fight. A fight against an enemy with complex integrated air defenses, surface-to-air missiles, and the capability to shoot us down." Secretary James, is that still true? I mean, what's the current state of aircraft readiness?
The mission capability rates have improved since 2015, so it's not quite as dire a circumstance as existed some years ago, but it still isn't good enough. And there are at least 4 factors that contribute to ongoing problems with mission capability rates. I would say first and foremost is we have old aircraft in the Air Force, and we have had great difficulty in retiring those aircraft over time. Congress has not permitted it. There has been more progress this last year than before, but the fact that the aircraft is old, it means they break down more frequently. Secondly is spare parts shortages, some of which they don't even make anymore because the aircraft are so old, and some of which is supply chain problems due to COVID. The third reason is a maintainer mismatch. We reduced our maintenance workforce too much years ago when we were undergoing a downsizing. We've been hiring ever since, but of course you hire junior people and it takes years to grow them into more experienced maintainers. So we have a mismatch of skills. And last is the budget. These constant CRs do not help. The uncertainty of the budget has hurt the mission capability rates as well.
So given all those limitations, what can the Air Force do to improve its mission readiness rates? Is there anything they're doing now?
Yeah, no, actually they're doing quite a bit. It's a very tough problem. Again, number one is the aircraft are very old, and there's only so much you can do with old aircraft. But the Air Force, I think, is moving in the right direction, and they're getting creative, quite frankly. So, for example, they have a variety of process improvement teams that are fanning out across the Air Force that are looking at process changes that would free up aircraft more quickly and increase the ability to turn them around more quickly. They're using predictive analytics. They're using AI. They're using 3D printing in order to print some of these spare parts that manufacturers simply don't make anymore. And this will shave a few days off of this aircraft fleet, that aircraft fleet. They're also pushing more capability out across the Air Force to a variety of bases in the Air Force to allow some additional maintenance to take place at home scene rather than having to send those aircraft off to the depot or off to some other location. That too saves days. And then the final one that comes to my mind is they're trying to do a better job of just flat out scheduling. There are 60-day maintenance requirements on many aircraft fleets, and they're trying to schedule that 60 days to happen at a time when it would not interfere with either operational matters or with training times. So just better scheduling can help. So all of these are in the right direction. They need to just keep it up.
You know, there's the unmanned Reaper attack drone. It has a mission capable rate of 91%. Why do you think that number is high as opposed to some of the other aircraft?
You know, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I'm really qualified to say, but my guess is it's one of the newer airframes. It's not quite as old as some of the oldest that we have in our fleet. Because it's newer, the spare parts are more available. It is also flown, of course, remotely, so it may not be undergoing some of the terrible weather conditions and the brutal, harsh conditions on the ground that aircraft have dealt with for years in the Middle East. So it comes back to a less harsh environment, I'll say. So this is speculation on my part, but of course, that's where we'd like to see all of our aircraft fleets be, up in that 90% level.
Well, Secretary James, changing gears here a little bit, you know, this week kicks off Women's History Month, and you were the second female Secretary of the Air Force. Tell us a little bit about what your experience was like.
Well, I think for as long as I live and whatever else I may do in my life, and I'm doing some pretty interesting things now, that will forever be the most humbling, the most purposeful, the best job, the best opportunity that I've ever had for leadership and to hopefully make a positive impact on an important organization, important mission, and a lot of people. So it was great.
So what ways do you think you were more effective as a leader because you're a woman?
Well, you know, I think, I'm not sure this is because I'm a woman, but I think what women need to do, really what everyone needs to do, is they need to play to their strengths in jobs and opportunities, professional environments. And we have to be self-aware enough to know that we're not strong at everything, but play to your strengths. Don't undersell those strengths. Bring them to the table, bring your best game every day. So for example, in my case, I had never served in combat. I've never served in uniform. So this is an area where I would never try to out combat pilot the combat pilot, if you will. That's where you have to sit back, you have to listen. It's a team environment after all. But what I did bring to the table, I did bring knowledge of how to get things done in the Pentagon from a bureaucratic perspective. I understood policy. I had been on Capitol Hill, so I understood budgets and how things happen or don't happen in the Congress. And I also had had a business career. So after all, we depend on the business community to do an awful lot of what we need done in the Air Force. So the ability to partner and so on, I think that was another strength that I brought to the table. So no one is strong at everything, but everybody is strong at something. And I think we women sometimes undervalue our strengths. So bring your best game every day and don't undervalue your strengths, and make sure you've got a good team surrounding you.
All right, well, Secretary James, thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
If you miss an episode of Government Matters, it's on our website, govmatters.tv. And tell us what you thought about today's program. You can reach us on Twitter at GovMattersTV. Follow us and get the latest updates, reminders, and links to our latest interviews. That's the latest from Washington. Join me weeknights at 8 and 10:30 on WJLA 24/7 News and Sunday mornings at 10:30 on 7 News to stay plugged in on issues that matter to the business of government. Thanks for watching. I'm Mimi Gurgis.